Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to some more of my rambles. It might be a little quieter than normal, so I apologize. Well, I want to talk about Trigger and the other one of Gurren Lagann, which is done by the same kind of people, but was not specifically done by Trigger. I want to talk about a lot of their work. Not really when it comes to the animation style, because we all know they have their own unique animation style, and I don't really want to cover it. I want to cover how they write stories and how it constantly feels like that their stories start going one way or start doing one thing and then fall at the deep end. This comes actually after seeing a tweet from someone basically saying that Kill la Kill is 10 out of 10, and it bugged me a little bit. So that's the main inspiration for this. Don't I don't really hate any Trigger show. I just usually don't overly like it. There's always something niggling in the back that I go, they could have, it just feels wrong. We'll start with Gurren Lagann, because that's usually most people's introduction to it. It's a paint by number story that is very nice and clear. Once it jumps into the future, it goes down a bit, but it still keeps with its kind of roots. But basically, instead of following a kind of concise story where they have one big bad guy and they're slowly going towards it and have a whole bunch of mini stories to lead up to that, they basically go in on the mini stories anymore, solid story, which in this case I didn't mind too much, but it was still a small issue, especially since that there's a lot of contrivance, and sometimes you just have to go, it's silly, it's anime, it's silly, rather than, oh, this is actually trying to do something provocative, which I'm actually going to say is really nice. It understands that you shouldn't take itself seriously. It takes itself fairly seriously, but it should not, you guys watching shouldn't take itself seriously. However, I want to go talk about the next, after this, which was kind of when Trigger was more or less made, after a while anyway. The next one after that was Kill la Kill, and I want to talk about it because it's it's the most prime example of the Trigger issues. The first one, the main issue, is shown in Kill la Kill. They begin right about episode 16-ish. They start driving this secondary message that's like, you don't need that secondary message. You never needed the secondary. It was funny. It was weird. It was great. Just literally, like episodes 1 through 13, I will probably say that they're some of the best episodes of any series ever made, because they're funny, they're lighthearted. Well, not really lighthearted, but lighthearted in the sense of they don't really care. And they really don't care about any of the rules and just go, okay, this is the world, this is how the world works, and people are silly. And it's amazing. But as soon as they began throwing all these messages into it, it kind of like dirtied the puddle of what they wanted to do. And it basically, instead of making them semi-episodic, where it was, they kind of have like mini arcs, like maybe 2 episodes are dedicated to one thing, but most of the time it's 1 episode dedicated to one thing, and they all like kind of literally connect, like little bits, tiny continuity put in, which is usually how I like a show. That's just my personal preference usually. When it comes to this, by about episode 16, they kind of just ditch that and basically go, okay, this is the new story. And it's just, really? You had something amazing going on. Now you want to try and throw in the message of this and this and this, and like throw a large pile of philosophy at us. The show wasn't about philosophy. Why are you trying to make it about philosophy? You're making it worse. And as the episodes go on and on and on, sure, the action goes up, and it actually becomes a pretty good action show. Rather than being a kind of okay action show and a really good comedy, it becomes a pretty good action show. So a great action show with really, really terrible drama. That doesn't turn into good comedy. That's the problem. That's the big problem. The drama isn't technically bad enough to be good comedy. So it's not funny. And it just... Whenever I get to that point in Kill la Kill, whenever I watch it, I just kind of cringe a bit, because it feels like I'm watching almost like Sword Art Online. But the problem is that like you look at this and you go, you could have been this, but no, you had to go down that pile, and just, it hurt. It really hurt. Then the next one is When Supernatural Battles Become Commonplace, which has a very different like look to it, but it has the same kind of trap that all of these have, more or less. It starts getting a little bit less later on, but it's still there, except for one of them. One of them is just, it's just silliness, and I'm going to go over it probably last because it's literally just silly. They're being silly. When Supernatural Battle Become Commonplace is literally just, it's thing is, unlike the rest of Trigger's work, where it's a basis, they're actually all unique, more or less, except for a handful. They're based on something. This one is very clearly based on a light novel and manga, really, but light novel mostly, and it has all the same common trappings of a light novel and Trigger put together, but both not to the same degree. And I don't really want to talk too much about it because I have not watched nearly enough of it, so I really am not the best person to ask when it comes to this. But apparently it's an okay show with, as I said, some of the both problems with both the Trigger and the light novel stuff are put together, but then it alleviates some of the other issues. For example, Trigger didn't have full writing authority, so the story isn't set right completely. And the same thing is set when it comes to the light novel, because Trigger had a bit of control. Not all the light novel trappings came in, which was very nice to see. I didn't really want another Sword Art Online. The next one is Kisnizer, which I've kind of seen. I've seen the first few episodes. It's not my thing. I'm just going to be blaming about it. I don't want to talk about it negatively, really, because it's just not my thing. It's something. It's a show. If you want to go watch it, go for it. If you like dub, I believe it's dubbed. If you like sub, I believe it's sub. So should be able to go watch it without any issue. It has a manga as well. From what it looks like, both of them are done. So I really have no idea. The next one is a weird one, actually, which is Little Witch Academia, because it has two continuities. It has the primary one, which is the animated series, which I will go over a little bit, and then two animated films. I will actually say, though, they're some of the best animated films ever made. Well, they're not really films; they're like more like mini episodes. Well, the first one's more like a mini episode. The other one is an actual movie, and they kind of do what Trigger did best with Kill la Kill. They're isolated stories, and you understand the characters and kind of their motives, and you just go, okay, what sillinesses are going to come? Boom. And because the art style is so nice and like nice to look at and stuff like that, you can literally go, yeah, no, this story is pretty good, and I would most definitely like listening to this and watching this and doing all this. So it was interesting. The next one, however, is the animated series, which was done by, amusing enough, by multiple different things. It was put into something really silly. The first 12 episodes vary on quality, but most of the time when they're an isolated story, it's pretty good. It's when the symbolism and the heavy-handed storytelling start appearing that plagued the last part of Kill la Kill and a bit of Gurren Lagann, which makes me feel really bad. It always feels bad whenever that kind of happens, because it's like, oh, you're turning a good show into something and doesn't want to. Now, I'll say in Little Witch Academia, I enjoyed it. Its secondary section more than Kill la Kill, probably because it was still not really taking itself quite as seriously as Kill la Kill was trying to. So it gets some bonus points. But once again, it's iffy. Now I want to talk about the darling in the room. Yep, Darling in the Franxx. Some people really, really love this show. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not one of them. And I was watching it when it was coming out. I will blatantly say, yeah, I saw it was coming out. It was really good. I've recently rewatched it. And I went, no, this show is shit. Well, it's not completely shit. No, it's not that bad. I'm not trying to diss on it quite as much. I will blatantly say that it is a vast improvement to Kill la Kill and Little Witch Academia in the terms of storytelling quality. Especially since it's not an episodic series. It's very clearly more of a serialized series, and it's stuck with that, which is fairly nice. The problem was because they kind of derived, in this case, rather than just jump into a story and keep that story going all the time, they have a story and then have it split off at about episode 17 and 18. It's like, what? 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 And it was just a massive problem, especially for me, because I found it like, I understood how this kind of was going. I was going, yeah, hell yes, this is nice. Yeah, I want to root for these characters. I'm going, I really don't like you now. I literally hate almost all of you. And the way your story is written, it's just, like, it didn't need to do, like, it was already world stakes. They didn't need to make the stakes even bigger. That's the problem with a lot of anime, is that they try and make the stakes bigger. You don't need to make the stakes bigger if you already have stakes. That's the problem. In Darling Franks, there was a stake. There was constant stakes in play. But no, they just go, hey, you know these stakes you liked? Yeah, no, we're gonna make them bigger. And I'm going, you're ruining the story by doing that. Don't. You're ruining the story. Please don't. No. And that was a massive problem for me. But mostly just me. A lot of people will probably not have that same issue. If we went over to other places, you probably would see it as well. I hate to make this reference, but Sword Art Online technically did this, especially in Alicization. Even though I like Alicization far more than the rest of them, it did it. It upped the stakes. Now, in this case, it was upping the stakes because the stakes before were shit. Anything. Literally. What was the last arc stake? Not really anything. So, what do? You actually make a stake. And it worked in the context of that show. Now, another show that the stakes increasing doesn't really matter in is Shakugan no Shana, and they did this in the second season, which the first part of the second season. I kind of want to go over that. I'm gonna have its own dedicated podcast because I really don't like the first season of that. Well, the second season, part 1. There we go. Great opening. Terrible season. But that one does it in the aspect that, oh hey, a new threat has appeared and they're doing major things with this. Like, I'm going, even though it wasn't a very good slice of life story, it was a better slice of life story than what you were giving us via action story wise. Pick one and stick with it. Once Shakugan no Shana gets its bearings and understands what it wants to be, it's a very good show, and it's my personal favorite show, even though that I know it has riddled with problems, and I really don't want to get into that. I have a whole basket case full of it. So, I really don't like saying this, but yeah, Darling in the Franxx, a little more iffy. Now, I want to talk about this one briefly, even though it's different of a production by quite a bit, but it has the same art style. Space Patrol Lilico, and the only reason why I'm talking about it is because it's meant to be silly. It doesn't have a story really to it. It's just about being silly. Is it a great show? No. Is the comedy pretty bad? Yeah. Is it funny? It's still funny. On the odd occasion. It's just a pile of references, and if you watch anything related to Trigger, you probably will enjoy it simply because it's silly like that. But everything else, you probably won't enjoy that much. It's silly, but it's the right kind of silly. Okay, now I want to talk about, I'm going to go over rankings for them out of 10. And really, most of the time, you're going to hear a lot of the same number. Gurren Lagann, 7 out of 10. Kill la Kill, 7 out of 10. Supernatural Battles, I can't do that. Space Patrol Lilico, depends on who's watching it. If you're watching it and you know Trigger very well, then I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. If you don't know Trigger, probably a 5 out of 10. Kisniver, once again, haven't really watched much of it, so I'm not going to give it a ranking. But because it's based on a manga rather than a light novel, I'll give it a gratuitous 7 out of 10. Little Witch Academia. I'm going to give it 3 different rankings because it has 3 different things. The first movie, I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. It was a very nice movie and it was very, very sweet. The second one was slightly bit better, 8.7 out of 10. And the series, probably a 7.5 out of 10 because we started getting some of the fixes, but there was still quite a bit of problems. Darling in the Franxx, oh man, I'm going to hate it for the squares in there. 7.7 out of 10. Why? Well, I explained why earlier, but that's kind of my rough rating scheme for it. And I do kind of feel bad that I'm having to do this because it's just why do I have to like hate on this show? I'll see you here next time when it'll hopefully be a little bit less depressing. Actually, it will most definitely be because I won't be talking about Trigger and I won't be pissing anyone off. I'll see you here next time. Bye bye.